Have you ever wished you could peek inside someone's mind, not to control them, not to invade their privacy, but simply to understand what they are really feeling? Imagine how many misunderstandings could be avoided, how many conflicts softened, if we could truly see beyond the mask of words. The truth is, we can't read every single thought another person has. No one can. But here is a secret that both modern psychology and ancient Buddhist wisdom agree on. While words can lie, the body almost never does. The eyes, the face, the gestures of the body, all of them reveal what the tongue tries so hard to conceal. Think about it. When someone says, "I'm fine," but their shoulders are slumped, their eyes avoid yours, and their lips tremble ever so slightly, you know, without a doubt, that they are not fine. When a friend insists, "I'm listening," but their gaze drifts, fingers tap impatiently, and their body leans away, you sense they are already somewhere else. And when someone smiles with their whole face, eyes crinkling, cheeks lifting, you don't need any words at all to feel their joy. This is the silent language we are all speaking every moment, and yet very few of us are taught how to read it. In Buddhism, this is not a matter of trickery or manipulation. The Buddha never encouraged us to exploit others' weaknesses or spy into their minds. Instead, he taught that awareness, deep, calm, compassionate awareness, allows us to see reality as it is. And reality speaks not only in words but in movements, expressions, and subtle signals. To read people in the Buddhist sense is to cultivate empathy. It is to sharpen our perception so that we can meet others where they truly are, rather than where they pretend to be. Let me tell you why this matters. Human beings are masters of disguise. We wear masks every day, at work, in our families, even among friends. We say what is expected. We suppress what is inconvenient. And we often silence the truths that make us vulnerable. But the body, bound so closely to the mind, slips these truths out. The eyes betray fear. The mouth betrays resentment. The hands betray nervousness. The body is like a mirror. It reflects the mind even when the mind wishes to hide. The Buddhist texts remind us, body, speech, and mind are three streams of the same river. They cannot be separated. If you disturb one, the others ripple. This means that if the mind is restless, the body cannot help but show restlessness, through pacing, shifting, tapping. If the heart is joyful, the face blossoms naturally, without effort. If the mind is heavy with doubt, the brows furrow. The gaze hardens, and silence thickens. When you know how to see these signs, you begin to enter a deeper kind of communication, not one of judgment, but one of compassionate insight. Now, here's where the story begins. In a small village long ago, there lived two brothers. One of them was blind, and yet he could perceive things that astonished even a king. How could a man with no eyes know truths that others could not see? The secret, as he later revealed, was not magical vision, it was awareness. He paid attention to what others overlooked, the tone of voice, the pace of footsteps, the way emotions leaked into actions. And from this simple but profound practice, he discovered that you don't need supernatural powers to understand people. You only need presence. In this episode of Dharma Veins, we will enter that story together. From the wisdom of the blind brother and the teachings of the Buddha, we will uncover three simple yet powerful techniques that anyone can practice. Techniques that help you understand people more clearly, not so you can judge them, not so you can control them, but so you can live with greater mindfulness and compassion. Because the more clearly we see others, the more clearly we see ourselves. And in that clarity, peace begins. In an old village, two brothers lived very different lives. The younger one worked as a farmer, laboring in the fields every day. The older brother, however, was blind. At first glance, people assumed he was dependent, limited, perhaps even useless in the work of survival. Yet the story unfolds to show something remarkable. While his eyes could not see, his awareness sharpened in other ways. The farmer brother faced a recurring problem. Animals invaded the crops, destroying what he had labored to plant. Out of desperation, he asked his blind brother to help. The arrangement was simple. Sit in the fields, listen carefully, and whenever animals approached, shout to drive them away. What seemed like a small act became the setting for a lesson much larger than farming. One day, a deer ran through the field and broke the fence. Shortly after, a king arrived, chasing that very deer. When he asked the blind man whether he had seen it, the reply was curious, "Your Majesty, I am blind, I cannot see, but I can tell you this. What you are chasing is not worth your time." Imagine the king's surprise. How could a blind man, who had never seen a single deer, declare that this particular animal was not worth the pursuit? Pressed for an explanation, the blind brother revealed what seemed impossible. "The creature you are chasing is a pregnant doe." A wise king does not hunt a pregnant animal. The king, skeptical but intrigued, sent his men to confirm. Indeed, they found the doe was carrying life within her. The astonishment of the king is easy to picture. How could a man with no eyes discern such a hidden truth? The meaning of this tale lies not in magical powers, but in attentiveness. The blind brother did not rely on sight, he relied on listening deeply, on sensing carefully, on interpreting the details others ignored. In Buddhist psychology, this aligns with the teaching that perception is not limited to the eyes. True seeing comes from a mind anchored in presence. Just as a lake, when undisturbed, reflects the moon clearly, a mind that is still can perceive subtleties hidden from restless perception. What makes this story powerful is not that the blind man guessed correctly, but that he demonstrated how refined awareness can reach beyond the surface. Where most people chase appearances, he attuned to patterns, the sound of movement, the quality of footsteps, the rhythm of breath. What others dismissed as ordinary, he treated as information. The result was insight that seemed like magic but was, in fact, mindfulness in action. The message is timeless. When our minds are calm and focused, we see what others overlook. The blind brother's wisdom shows us that attention, sharpened by stillness, can penetrate the veil of appearances. We live in a culture flooded with images, quick judgments, and distractions. Yet here is a reminder that clarity does not come from having perfect eyesight, but from having a steady mind. The story strips away unnecessary detail and points us toward a simple truth. Awareness is power. Not power to dominate or manipulate, but power to understand. A man without sight could outperceive a king because he embodied a principle the Buddha taught again and again: to truly know, you must first be fully present. The blind brother revealed a secret that is both simple and profound. He never truly read minds. What he did was far more practical, and in many ways, more reliable. He observed the silent signals of the body, the little gestures, the pauses, the ways people move when they think no one is watching. And here is where Buddhist wisdom enters with extraordinary clarity. The Buddha himself emphasized that before you can understand another person, you must first quiet your own mind. Why? Because a restless mind projects its own fears and desires onto others. If you are lost in the past or worried about the future, you no longer see the present clearly. You are not reading the other person. You are only reading your own confusion reflected back at you. So when the blind brother spoke of his ability, he was not claiming magic. He was pointing toward a truth that modern psychology now confirms. The body and the mind are inseparable. Emotions leak into posture. Stress appears in the eyes. Sincerity is betrayed or confirmed by the mouth, the brows, the tilt of the head. Long before body language became a field of study, the Buddha already taught that the key to true perception lies in awareness, mindfulness. To notice another person accurately, you must train yourself to notice without judgment, without impatience, and without the noise of your own inner dialogue. This is why the story still feels fresh today. The blind brother is not a prophet. He is a mirror of the Buddhist principle that clarity of mind sharpens perception. He reminds us that understanding is not about extraordinary powers, it is about extraordinary presence. Out of this presence arise three simple yet powerful skills: learning to read the eyes, to notice the subtle expressions of the face, and to interpret the language of gestures and body movements. These are not tricks to manipulate people, but doorways to empathy. They teach us how to step outside of ourselves, how to listen not only to words but to the silent language every human being speaks. When we talk about the eyes as the windows of the soul, it's not just poetic language. It reflects a timeless observation that has been made across cultures and is also deeply aligned with Buddhist thought. The Buddha often reminded his disciples that the mind and body are inseparable. And nowhere is this more visible than in the subtle play of the eyes. To observe the eyes carefully is to glimpse into the state of a person's inner world. Think of it this way: When someone's gaze drifts constantly, unable to settle, what you are really seeing is the turbulence of the mind. Just as a lake disturbed by the wind cannot reflect the moon clearly, a restless mind cannot keep its eyes steady. This wandering gaze often signals worry, distraction, or a desire to escape the present moment. In daily interactions, if someone's eyes keep searching for the exit during a conversation, it's a strong sign they want to leave, not necessarily because of you, but because their mind is elsewhere, unsettled. Avoiding eye contact altogether has another layer. In Buddhist psychology, fear and attachment are often hidden beneath avoidance. A person who cannot meet your eyes may be hiding something, or they may simply be afraid of being seen. Their avoidance is not always deception, it can also be shame, insecurity, or cultural conditioning. A wise observer, grounded in mindfulness, does not rush to judge but notices. Here is fear. Here is hesitation. The practice is to observe without labeling the person as liar or coward, but to recognize the emotion moving through them. On the other hand, when someone looks directly at you with steady eyes, especially when their gaze has a certain brightness, it is usually a marker of presence and sincerity. This doesn't mean they are incapable of deception, but it does often mean they are willing to connect. A calm, focused gaze is like the moon reflected on still water, clear, direct, and honest. You feel as though they are truly with you, not lost in their own mind. Now consider the smaller details: the pupils, the eyebrows, the tiny wrinkles of the forehead. Modern neuroscience shows that dilation of the pupils is linked to arousal, sometimes excitement, sometimes attraction, sometimes fear. In ancient Buddhist teachings, it is said that the eye faculty responds directly to the mind's impressions. When someone's pupils expand, it means their mind is fully engaged in what they are experiencing. Conversely, when the pupils shrink, it can mean discomfort, dislike, or even hostility. It is the body's way of saying, "I do not welcome this." Eyebrows and forehead lines also reveal unspoken truths. When the brows draw together and a crease deepens, it is a sign of cognitive strain. Someone is working through confusion or holding on to tension. When the brows lift, the eyes widen, and the face opens, that moment is pure surprise, curiosity, or delight. In this way, the upper face becomes like a sutra written in living ink, constantly shifting to express the hidden movements of thought and feeling. Even redness in the eyes is telling. In the Buddhist lens, suffering manifests through the body in countless ways. When the whites of the eyes turn red, it often indicates fatigue, stress, or illness. It reminds us to look with compassion. A person with tired, strained eyes may not have the capacity for deep conversation. If we observe carefully, we might realize they are not disinterested in us, they are simply exhausted. Here the lesson is not just about detecting the truth but about responding wisely, with empathy. In my years of research, I've come to see the study of eyes as more than a tool for reading others. It is a mirror for our own awareness. If we approach people with a restless or judgmental mind, we will misinterpret their signals. But if we approach with the calm presence that the Buddha encouraged, anchored in the present moment, we begin to see more clearly. The eyes teach us that perception is always relational. What we see in them is shaped by the clarity within us. So when we say, "The eyes are the windows of the soul," in Buddhist terms, it means the eyes reveal the present state of mind, here and now. They do not lie about stress, distraction, joy, or sorrow. Our task is to notice these reflections, not to exploit them, but to cultivate deeper understanding. The eyes invite us into the practice of compassionate seeing, seeing not only the truth of another person, but also the echoes of our own mind as we observe them. The human face is a living manuscript. Every subtle movement writes a sentence about what the heart and mind are experiencing in the present moment. In Buddhist psychology, this is deeply consistent with the teaching that body, speech, and mind are inseparable streams, each reflecting the others. If you pay close attention to the face, you are essentially reading the mind's imprint on the body. Take the smile as an example. A true smile, one that lifts not only the corners of the lips but also engages the eyes and cheeks, is an unmistakable signal of genuine joy. The Buddha often spoke about mudita, the ability to rejoice in the happiness of others. A real smile is the outward expression of mudita. It is spontaneous, unforced, and it radiates warmth. When the eyes narrow gently, the cheeks rise, and a sparkle appears, you can feel the sincerity. Compare that to a polite or forced smile, which may move the lips but leaves the eyes untouched. In Buddhist terms, the former flows from wholesome mental states, while the latter may be conditioned by social expectation or hidden discomfort. Now think about the mouth pressed tightly together, the lips sealed with tension. This gesture often communicates resistance, disagreement, or inner turmoil. In the Abhidhamma, such physical tightness is described as the bodily formation of aversion, dosa. The mind resists, and the body follows by compressing itself, literally closing off the channel of speech. Even if the person says nothing, the silent protest is clear. It is the face's way of expressing, "I cannot accept this." A mindful observer will not take it as an attack but as a clue that the other person's mind is unsettled, caught in judgment or fear. The forehead, too, tells its own story. A deepening line between the brows often appears when the mind is entangled in complexity. It is the mark of vicikiccha, doubt, uncertainty, or intense mental labor. Imagine someone insisting, "I'm fine," while their brow contracts and a small furrow deepens. In that moment, words and body are at odds. The Buddhist teaching on congruence is not expressed in modern language. But the principle is there. When mind and body are aligned, truth is transparent. When they diverge, suffering is revealed. One of the most poignant examples is the person who says, "I'm okay," but whose mouth turns downward, whose eyes lack sparkle, whose forehead tightens as though holding back tears. The body betrays what the words cannot carry. In Buddhist practice, this moment is an invitation to compassion. Instead of believing the literal words, a mindful observer sees the silent suffering. You do not confront them harshly, nor expose them with accusation. Instead, you create space for them to be seen, which in itself can be healing. What fascinates me, as a researcher of both Buddhist texts and human behavior, is how consistently the face reflects the subtle qualities of mind. The Satipatthana Sutta instructs practitioners to be aware of feelings, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, as they arise. When we watch a person's face, we are essentially witnessing that sutta in action. The curve of the lips, the furrow of the brow, the rise of the cheeks, these are the living evidence of Vedana. The felt tones of existence, surfacing in real time. To truly understand facial expressions, one must approach them not with suspicion but with presence. If you study them as tools for manipulation, you miss the deeper lesson. But if you study them as dharma, as teachings written on the canvas of the body, then every face becomes a sacred text. Each smile, frown, or crease is a reminder of impermanence, of how quickly the mind changes, and of how interconnected our inner and outer worlds really are. The body often speaks more honestly than the tongue. Long before modern psychology coined the phrase body language, Buddhist teachings already emphasized the unity of body, speech, and mind. Whatever arises in consciousness inevitably flows into the body, whether through posture, gestures, or subtle tension. By learning to see these signals, we are not acquiring a trick for manipulation but cultivating the kind of mindful observation that allows us to meet others with clarity and compassion. Take the simple gesture of crossed arms. On the surface, it looks like nothing more than comfort or habit. But context transforms its meaning. In many cases, it signals defensiveness, a closing of the chest, a symbolic barrier against intrusion. From a Buddhist perspective, this reflects the mental quality of dosa, aversion or resistance. The mind says, "I am not open," and the body responds by folding in. Yet sometimes people cross their arms because the room is cold or because that is simply their natural posture. The mindful observer must therefore remember the principle of context plus cluster. We never conclude based on a single gesture, we read it alongside tone of voice, facial expression, and circumstance. Now consider the act of leaning forward. This movement is like the body's way of bowing. It reflects interest, presence, and a willingness to connect. In Buddhist practice, when disciples leaned toward the Buddha as he spoke, it was not only respect, it was hunger for wisdom. In daily life, if someone inclines their body toward you while you speak, it is a silent statement. "I value what you are saying. I want to hear more." In contrast, a body leaning back, disengaged, may indicate distance or lack of trust. What is profound here is that the body does not lie. Even when words are polite, posture can reveal where the heart truly is. The restless tapping of fingers tells another story. It is the sound of impatience. In Buddhist psychology, this is rooted in restlessness, uddhacca, the inability of the mind to rest in the present. The body translates this agitation into repetitive movements: drumming on the table, bouncing the knee, shifting in the seat. When you see it, you are not witnessing hostility so much as disconnection. The person's mind has already left the moment, they are in the future, wishing to move on. This observation is not meant to judge them but to invite you to recognize impermanence at play. Attention comes and goes like the tide. And then there is the habit of touching the face, stroking the chin, rubbing the temple, covering the mouth. These gestures often reveal thought, worry, or internal dialogue. In Buddhist thought, such actions reflect the subtle dance of mental proliferation, what the texts call papancha. The mind spins stories, and the body responds with fidgeting, as if trying to hold or soothe itself. A person deep in contemplation may unconsciously rest their hand on their face, signaling the weight of their inner process. To observe this is to see the outer trace of inner rumination. What ties all these gestures together is the principle of congruence. If someone leans forward with bright eyes and open hands, the signals converge. They are engaged, present, sincere. If, however, their arms are crossed, their fingers tapping, and their gaze avoiding, the cluster points to discomfort or hidden resistance. In Buddhism, this teaches us to look beyond the surface and see the conditions beneath. People's bodies reveal not only their momentary feelings but also their suffering, their anxieties, their longing for safety. As a researcher steeped in both Buddhist texts and human behavior, I see body language as a Dharma teaching written in movement. The crossed arms remind us of how often the mind defends itself. The lean forward reminds us of curiosity, of wholesome desire to learn. The tapping fingers show us the suffering of restlessness, while the hand on the face shows us the burden of thought. These are not just signals to decode but lessons in compassion. Each gesture says, "This is where my mind is right now." To recognize that, without judgment, is already to practice mindfulness and to embody the Buddha's path of wise attention. Signals aren't verdicts, they're breadcrumbs. In Buddhist terms, they're conditioned phenomena, arising and passing due to causes and conditions, not final truths about a person's character. When we treat a single cue as proof, we slip into clinging to views, ditthi. The wiser stance is to read patterns, not minds, and to let each observation be a hypothesis you're willing to revise. 3 anchors make that possible: context, baseline, and clusters, held together by mindfulness. Context is dependent origination in everyday clothes. Nothing appears by itself. A tightened jaw might be defiance, or just someone bracing against cold air. Dilated pupils can signal interest, or a darker room. Caffeine, or medication. Crossed arms can mean defensiveness, or a comfortable resting posture during a long meeting. Culture, power dynamics, fatigue, time pressure, room temperature, noise, lighting, all of these are conditions that shape behavior. The Buddha taught that grasping at appearances without seeing conditions creates dukkha, unnecessary friction. So before you label a gesture, widen the frame. Where are we? What just happened? What pressures, explicit or subtle, are present? Context keeps compassion alive because it reminds us behavior is often situational, not essential. Baseline is the antidote to one-size-fits-all reading. Each person carries habitual formations, sankhara, their own rhythms of speech, posture, and expression. One colleague naturally speaks softly. Another always looks away when thinking. A friend fidgets even when relaxed. If you don't know someone's normal, you'll misread their change. The mindful researcher learns a person's baseline first, then watches for deviations relative to that person, not relative to your preferences. In practice, spend the first minutes of any interaction simply noticing pace of breath, resting face, typical eye contact, default posture. Later, when the pace suddenly quickens, the voice tightens, or the gaze hardens, you're not guessing, you're detecting a meaningful shift from their baseline. Clusters give probability its backbone. A single cue is a rumor, 3 converging cues are a story. In Buddhist analysis, we don't cling to the first impression, We look for corroboration across aggregates: body, kaya; feeling, tone, vedana; mental state, sata; and mental patterns, dhamma. If someone says, "I'm fine," while the corners of the mouth pull downward, the brow knits, and the shoulders cave, the cluster leans toward distress. If a candidate leans forward, maintains steady gaze, paraphrases your question accurately, and asks clarifying questions, the cluster leans toward genuine engagement. Require temporal proximity as well, signals that arrive together or in sequence around the same moment, so you aren't stitching unrelated behaviors into the same narrative. Mindfulness, sati, is the glue. Without it, you will read your projections, not the person. A restless mind amplifies what it fears and edits out what it doesn't want to see. The Buddha's instruction is elegantly practical: steady attention in the present, free from grasping and aversion, reveals things as they are. Before you read anyone, read yourself. Take 2 breaths. Feel the contact of your feet. Name your current mood: curious, rushed, annoyed, and set an intention, samma sankappa, to understand. Not to win, to help. Not to expose. This self-centering interrupts confirmation bias and the fundamental attribution error, the modern names for very old habits of mind. A simple field method. Context. What conditions could be shaping what I see right now? Environment. Culture. Hierarchy. Timing. Physiology. Baseline. How does this compare to this person's usual tone? Posture. And pace? Clusters. Do I have at least 3 cues pointing in the same direction? Body. Face. Voice. Words. Is there congruence between verbal and nonverbal? Kind check-in. Can I verify gently? I might be off, but I'm noticing you seem a bit pressed. Want to pause or circle back? Notice how this method harmonizes with right speech: samma vaka, truthful, timely, gentle, and beneficial. We don't weaponize signals, we use them to care more precisely. If your partner says, "I'm okay," but the mouth tightens, the eyes dull, and the breath shortens, that's not a cue to prosecute, it's a cue to soften. I'm here. No need to force it. Would a quiet walk help? If a team member taps fingers, glances at the clock, and leans back as you present, consider context, tight deadline, and ask with humility, "Is now a bad time?" We can revise the agenda. Reading without mindfulness provokes defensiveness. Reading with mindfulness invites safety. Ethically, this approach matters. Buddhism cautions against divisive speech and harsh speech. Treating cues as absolute proof tends to produce both. Treating cues as provisional insights keeps the heart open. You don't accuse, you inquire. You don't corner, you create room. The stance is scientific and compassionate at once. Hold hypotheses lightly. Update them as new data appears. And keep your intention tuned to the alleviation of suffering, karuna. 2 practice drills to make this real. 1. Baseline journaling. For 3 people you see often, write a 3-line snapshot of their typical voice volume, gaze style, and resting posture. For a week, note only changes from that snapshot. And pair each note with context, sleep, deadlines, setting. This trains your eye to compare to them, not to your bias. 2. Cluster counting. In conversations, don't decide until you can name 3 converging cues. If you can't, ask one kind clarifying question. This forces your mind to slow down and see causes and conditions before leaping to conclusions. Underneath all of this is a distinctly Buddhist confidence. When attention is steady and the heart is kind, reality becomes easier to read. The silent language of the world is not mystical. It is simply the natural coherence of body and mind revealed in the present. Context keeps you fair. Baseline keeps you accurate. Clusters keep you honest. Mindfulness keeps you human. You've just discovered 3 simple yet profound skills: how to understand people through their eyes, their facial expressions, and their gestures. But remember, these skills are not weapons to judge or to control. They are bridges, ways of deepening empathy, ways of meeting another human being with compassion rather than suspicion. When you learn to observe with presence, you begin to recognize not only what others are feeling but also how your own mind reacts in return. This is how understanding grows into wisdom, and wisdom blossoms into kindness. At Dharma Veins, our wish is simple: that each of us learns to see more clearly so that we may live more gently. In a world shaken by natural disasters, by wars, and by the suffering that touches so many lives, may the blessings of the Buddha's teachings spread as a light of comfort. May all beings who are caught in fear, in loss, in grief, find peace and safety. May compassion extend to every corner of the earth, healing the wounds that conflict and tragedy leave behind. May we remember, even in times of great darkness, that the human heart has the capacity to shine with boundless love. If today's teaching has touched you, I invite you to support this journey. Like this video if you found value in it. Subscribe to the channel so we can continue walking the path together. And share it with others so that the wisdom of the Dharma can reach those who need it most. And now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever sensed the truth of someone's feelings just by watching their eyes or noticing a small gesture? What did that experience teach you? Share your reflections in the comments below. Your story might help another viewer recognize the power of mindful observation in their own life. Together, let's not only learn the Dharma but embody it, one moment of awareness, one act of compassion at a time.